Hey, everybody, testing, doggone it. Make sure this is working. Yes, okay. Welcome to the Constitution class, episode 1. Class is going to start here in about 10 minutes. So, we're going to let people come in. I'm going to actually stop the camera for a minute because I've got to do something. Be right back, but we will be here. Hey, everybody. How you guys doing? I can't believe we're by ourselves. Oh, there is the war hamster. He's here, coming in.
What's happening? You hear me okay?
Maybe.
Good, good, good.
There he is.
Just getting logged into YouTube.
I had I had an appointment today in Redlands from 1 to 2, and it went over. Then I had to fight traffic in Southern California to get back here.
Because is it raining up there?
raining, so it just was. It was. Let's just say that it's quite possible that Doug may be late. I mean, in fact, actually, I'm going to check weather, or I'm going to check traffic.
You want
Did
me
you did you get my text message?
that you were running late? I did.
Yeah. Well, actually, traffic's not too bad coming back from Fallbrook. So I don't see a lot of. I mean, I see red in the typical areas right there between Rancho and Winchester, but you know,
That part of the 15 doesn't get blocked up.
I
Doesn't get
told.
backed up till later.
Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate you saying that.
I knew you were gonna like that.
Hmm. Keto yogurts. That's my vice.
I got super busy today, so I haven't even read the 2 batches of Twitter files that dropped today. Both on
I've been
Matt.
busy as well. I know the world is going absolutely crazy after what happened last night on the football game.
Well, the newsletter I just read was from Steve Kirsch, and he is hypothesizing that the gentleman was brain dead within 10 minutes on the field.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Well, when, and obviously we have to be very careful with our language. But the people who were saying that it was a head injury, I was like, nobody does CPR for head injuries.
Someone thought it was a broken neck, and you don't do CPR for broken neck because you can do more damage. You immediately intubate.
My humble opinion is that he ain't coming back, and I don't mean that in a negative.
No.
Just,
Well, the interesting thing about it is, and this wouldn't have happened 6 months ago, is the internet was blowing up with people actually having conversations about what the possible causes are, and that could not have been done 6 months prior without risking the ban hammer. No, Darren, I didn't get to you yet. I do have it linked up though. With apologies, it's been a busy week, the holidays and all. The other really fun thing going on is Speaker of the House. They are now in adjournment for the day. There is no speaker, and the number of defectors from McCarthy appears to be at 20, and it started out at 15, so he's going the wrong direction.
We were having the debate last night about what's my opinion? Do I have an opinion on whether or not McCarthy should be the guy? Should it be somebody else? And I mean, and obviously there's those rumors still going around whether or not Trump could come in and be the Speaker of the House, and whatever.
I've always thought that was silly. I've always thought it was silly. He's plus, then people, they always thought, he comes in, he impeach Biden and Harris. Impeachment of Biden and Harris was never a realistic possibility. The bipartisan Senate would never, ever go that direction. That's political impeachments are not a good use of time or resources. Impeachments,
and it's also not a good precedent to set.
Well, the precedent's was already set. The first political impeachment was Clinton, and the second two were Trump twice. So the precedent's out there. You need to get away from it.
Well, I don't think. Okay, so there he is. All right, so I'm going to disagree that I'm going to disagree about Clinton's impeachment political. I think Clinton's impeachment was more of a distraction to distract away. It was political, but not a political attack. It was a political theater to distract.
Well, it backfired. But at the end of the day, the stuff that they were trying to investigate them for, and Ken Starr says this in his own book, but they did not have enough to move forward, and the political pressure was on there to do that, so they grabbed what they could, and that was a political mistake. But I do agree with the idea of impeachment in this House for the sake of getting information out there. For example, there's several people in the Biden administration are not following their oath of office. Now, you may not be able to convict them in the Senate, but those impeachment trials will have discovery. And a couple, like Mayorkas.
Doctor, and you hear how tough it is inside hospitals at the moment, and the fears of new variants mixed
Where is
with
that
flu
coming from?
that is coming on.
It's not coming from
and
me.
You would think that the country would respond by saying, okay, we will make sure we are all up to date on all
Oh, you know
vaccines. But I had a strange conversation.
I know what that is. That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I turned on my other computer so I could look at my stuff, and like usual, Fox News or someone like that just started playing a video automatically. I hate that. I hate pages that just start playing stuff automatically. That was me. I apologize.
Forgiven.
I just thought it was your way to get us to zip it so we can jump into the Constitution.
Yeah, there's that too. I was pulling up some stuff that I have for today.
I thought you might have been late because of the rain.
I actually finished my class extra early, in other words, on time, to make sure that there wasn't any challenge when it came to getting here.
Copy that.
I haven't had time to go to the credit union.
Wow.
You know, I turn off autoplay, but for some reason, 2 or 3 pages still autoplay. Because it's with their site. They just do it. But anyway, thank you, Darren.
What's the I think it's. I think we're getting ready to do a new round of the Constitution.
We are.
Day one.
So, do you have do you have anything that you would like to share, or are we just going to talk today and then implement that next week?
What do you mean?
Like in terms of like audio, visual, or visual stuff.
I do have something for the preamble, but I don't have it up yet. I have to find it in a minute. But yeah, I do have one thing. Oh, I forgot about that. Thanks for I'm gonna find it real quick.
I signed up for a course.
Anyway,
I signed up for a course of a 10 video series on the Federalist Papers from whatchamacallit, Hillsdale College.
Mm-hmm.
So I just started watching that, but he did a little bit on the preamble, so I just watched it last night. So it'll be interesting.
Oh, so you want to compare some notes here, huh?
Well, I always compare.
Did you see the video I sent you about the Liberty whatchamacallit that did it on the Danbury Baptist letter?
I've got the video queued up. I have not watched it.
Okay, yeah, it's a pretty good video. They don't go into the Puritans versus the Baptist kind of thing that I talk about and what it was really about. They key more about the federal government's role or lack thereof. And for those of you who are curious, when it came to the Danbury Baptist, Jefferson wrote this letter to the responding to the Danbury Baptists who were complaining that they were under the control of basically the established church in Connecticut, which was a Congregationalist, which are basically just a new name for the Puritans. And the idea was the term wall of separation of church and state is in that letter. That's where that separation of church and state comes from. It's not in the Constitution. And what Jefferson meant by that was that it's a state issue. The federal government can't get involved. But this video, while it's a very good video and it's for the most part on target, they emphasized that it meant that that government itself couldn't get involved. And, it was about, creating a wall around government away from the church, not a wall around the church away from government. But which is a good way of explaining it, but it didn't get into enough detail that would make Mr. Context happy. But that said, good to see you guys. So for those of you who have not gone through the Constitution with us before, or you have been relatively new over the last few weeks while we were just chatting and talking about what was going on, what we do here is we will, as we have once or twice before. twice before, right?
This is our okay. So this is going to be the third time that you've gone through the Constitution.
That's what I thought.
But the first time you did it, that was when you started with Scott.
Started with Scott, and then
there was a breakup, and then I came in and kind of plugged the hole, and then we went through it again, and then we brought in Warhamster, and now this is
so this will be the first time we're going to go through the whole Constitution in its entirety with all three of us.
With all three of us, yes.
Are you sure I wasn't there for part of the first one, the second one? I mean,
no, I was there for part of it, but not from the very beginning.
Not from the very beginning. And see, when you joined, it was already the second time that we had gone through.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
All right. So that all said, backdoor it through the app. Darren, if I was that intelligent with computers, I wouldn't need people like you. Thank you. But I have no idea what you mean backdoor through the app. But thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm
an old guy, man, and I have fits just with my smartphone, much less my computer.
Doug, are we doing the preamble today?
We are doing the preamble today, and a little bit of history. So anyway, get back to what I was saying before we got knocked off target by. We'll blame Ron today. So I'm such a giving mood. I'm going to throw everything at you. Normally what we do is we go through the Constitution line by line. If you miss days, don't worry about it. Not only can you watch these at any time in the past, but also because if you're in the chat room and you have questions about the material, I'm willing to entertain that. I request, though, that the questions are regarding the material. That all said, real quick side note, died suddenly was an interesting video, but a lot of it also is dubious, to say the least. While I do agree with what they're trying to show and say, and I'm right there with everybody when it comes to the problems of stuff like that, it was dubious in some things.
I would very much like to talk with you about that offline. We can't talk about that on this channel. That's
right.
Yeah.
The fact I even mentioned the name of the vid probably could be pushing it. But anyway. All right. That all said, before the Constitution, there were other things. Remember that the founding fathers, they were colonists, English colonists. Their history was British history. They were English, after all. And their biggest complaint was, hey, as Englishmen, we should be treated like Englishmen. We deserve to be treated with the same rights. They already understood what natural rights were and freedom and liberty and the right to bear arms, jury, trials by jury, innocent until proven guilty. All of that was already a part of their culture because of their English heritage. And the basis of that came from the Saxons. The Saxons were originally from the northern Germanic provinces and in some cases the southern Scandinavian areas. And the Saxons were not an ethnic group as much as they were a confederation of tribes and groups that had come together that believed the same system. The Saxons earned their name because they carried a blade called a sax on their hip, and the Romans called them Saxons as a result. The Saxons' influence on the British system and ultimately what would become the American system was incredibly huge and probably the dominant influence of all of them. That is not to take away from other influences such as the Bible or Slovenia or some of the other Roman history, Greek history, and so on and so forth. That's not to take away from those influences. But the primary influence was really the Saxon system. Now, during the early parts of the Saxon system forming, because they understood what freedom was, what wound up happening eventually in 1215 was something called the Magna Carta. You may have heard of it. It means the Grand Charter, and it was a a document that was important, and the original document was the barons had come together and basically said, hey, we're not being treated with the freedom as landowners, as property owners. This is what's going on here is the king is acting in a manner that's overpowering the parliament and the people. And according to the Saxon system, nobody's above the law, and the legislature is really the strongest part of the system. And so the barons got together with the clergy, because the clergy is the one that knew how to write, and they wrote the Magna Carta. But the first version was changed because when the final provision was finally drafted, they changed the term in that document from any baron to any freeman, because they got to realizing that the Magna Carta wasn't just about the barons. It was about all free members of English society. We say free because there were some that were indentured servants and some of them that were enslaved. But for the most part, most members of the society were free persons. And so it said they changed it from any baron to any freeman. And then they stipulating to whom provisions applied, not just to the barons, but to all. So the term eventually would include all Englishmen. And as society progressed, the Magna Carta was understood to apply to all Englishmen. Well, when it came time for the founding fathers to write this document, and they wrote the Constitution afterwards, Governor Morris was tasked with writing the preamble, and the beginning was a play on the words from the Magna Carta. But instead of all Englishmen or any freemen, they went with something a little bit bigger, because it wasn't just about freemen or citizens. It was about everybody that was here. That this document would cover and influence, and in the long run benefit everyone here. So it wasn't we the citizens, or we the freemen, or we the Englishmen. They chose we the people. That was the influence, going all the way back to the Magna Carta. Now, excuse me, I had a 24-hour flu like 5 days ago, and I'm still coughing here and there, so I apologize. And so as the society developed and the Saxon system took a firmer hold, and then colonies in the New World were established, the English colonies developed legal codes incorporating the same liberties that were penned in the Magna Carta. And then another influence later, as the settlements were still developing, was the 1689 English Bill of Rights, or English Declaration of Rights, which, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, you may have heard of it, which they call it the Bloodless Revolution. And when it came to the English part of it, it essentially was not so bloodless for the Scots and the Welsh and the Irish. That's beside the point. But for the English part of it, it was a bloodless revolution. And out of it, a year later, or less than a year later, the 1689 English Bill of Rights emerged, and that became very influential also on the settlers, the Englishmen who lived in the English colonies that would someday become the United States. And one thing that about the Americans, the people who lived in the colonies, and the people who were in England, as opposed to the rest of the world, is even if you were not literate, you didn't know how to read, you understood your rights, you understood the system, you knew about the dispensation of rights by some type of providence, as the Saxons believed, and it came to be believed your rights come from God once Christianity took over in England. And so Edmund Burke once observed, paying attention to what was going on in England and the colonies and all that, was that in no country perhaps in the world is law so general a study. What he meant was even those who were illiterate knew. They knew their Constitution. They knew their English Bill of Rights. They knew the Magna Carta. Now, you got to realize the English colonies developed differently than other colonies. For example, the Spanish, they didn't come here to colonize the way the English did. When they first came to the New World, and the Portuguese and Spanish were the first ones, they brought their armies. It was a military conquest. They came as military conquerors to rape, to pillage, take the gold, take the silver, and that's what the Spanish and the Portuguese did. When it came time for the English to begin colonizing the New World, and understand that where the English colonies wound up developing was actually technically Spanish land, but the Spanish didn't like that property. It was too far to the north, too rocky, too cold to them. Remember, Spain is right off the Mediterranean. So English, they're like, yeah, now we can handle cold and rocky. We're from the island up there on the northwest corner of Europe. So but the Spanish came as conquerors, but the English didn't do it that way. The English crown, what they did is they offered charters. It was an investment. It was an opportunity for families to start over again or to start anew, and investors to, either put their money into the colonies to help, do it, or go themselves. So it was a different. So it was a different dynamic.
Doug?
Yes.
Since we know some of the Pilgrim outposts came against the will of the British Crown, when did they sort of make that adjustment?
Say the beginning again, because I missed the first few words.
Well, the original, several of the original Pilgrim settlers came against the will of the Crown.
Right.
So when did the change in policy take place? It had to have been 1600s.
Yeah, well, it's funny because they were there on a charter, sort of. They wanted to join a charter that had already been launched, the Massachusetts Bay Company. But because they were separatists, they went to a little north. It's funny because all the history books make it sound like they accidentally, they got blown off course. They were separatists.
We're talking Plymouth Rock here. Yeah.
They're talking Plymouth.
Yeah.
And so the Plymouth colony actually was a little different. Now, that said, it was funded by investors from Britain. They had to pay that back. Ultimately, the British Crown accepted it as not a charter. I can't remember. There's a different name for the type of colony it was. And then you had your charters, you had your commonwealths, you had, different types. And Darren says, yeah, but they were under a monarch or king rule. Yeah, well, all of Europe was. That's not going to change at that point. But the idea for the crown was, go ahead, pilgrims. We're fine with that, because if you do well, you're on our land. You're going to pay us taxes. If you don't do well, you lost the money. Doesn't cost us anything. So the crown was more than happy to allow them to go ahead and do what they did. And so not without a warrant, technically, Kikio. Sorry, chat question, and I got averted there. Can police legally search your car if you have a firearm in it? If they believe that you do, there's a just cause and all of that, but they'd have to have a warrant technically. Let's say you have it hidden in a locked section in the center of your truck. They can't say unlock that.
No, they can't. The police cannot search your vehicle without your consent or a warrant.
Right?
Either one. You have.
Yeah, exactly.
You have one or the other.
So now,
and I mean, now if they
detain you, got just cause and then get a warrant.
Well, actually,
because you're refusing, then that.
So I'll tell you a trick that they use to if they arrest you. If they arrest you for like resisting arrest, or they do something where they're going to take you away, and then they're going to tow your vehicle, they are going to go through your vehicle.
Oh yeah.
That's without a warrant. Now, I don't believe that if whatever they find in the vehicle at that point in time, I don't necessarily know if that's admissible in court, but one of my very close friends is Highway Patrol. And so I've asked him a lot of these questions.
What I tell people is they're like vampires. They can't come in unless you invite them. Right. But once you invite them, all bets are off. All right. Get back to the lesson here. I appreciate the question, Kikio, but I'm going to try to stay on topic today. even though I do appreciate the question. All right, so so you've got this dynamic in the English colonies that's different. These are not conquerors. These are families. These are investors. They're not there to fight with the local population. In many cases, they needed their help. They were making treaties with the local population. So you don't see situations like Cortez down in Mexico in the English colonies, at least not at first. When there were clashes later on with the local population, it was as the English colonies advanced, they grew, they started moving into the frontier, they began to encroach on, for example, good hunting grounds, things like that. And then, of course, there's going to be a clash of civilizations. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on that, but it was a different dynamic. The Spanish and the Portuguese were here as conquerors, and they were exactly what a lot of your lefties want to say that the white man was, but it wasn't the English colonists, not at first anyway. They were trying to make treaties with the local population. Okay, now that all said, one of the things that happened was Jamestown and Plymouth both, because they were, Christians, they came from a largely Puritan background, and the Puritans believed at that time that as Christians, we all trust each other, and they believed in communal living. They did that in Holland, and they did that in parts of Britain, where they would have these little communal societies. And so as these colonies emerged, they began with that kind of belief, a communal system. And in the sense of Plymouth also, they were kind of ordered to do it that way anyway, because all of their investors expected their money back. So the investors basically said, put it all in a central pile. You put in what you can, you take only what you need, and then everything else is profit for the investors. Ultimately, though, the communal pile, be it because of Puritan reasons or because of the investors, ultimately it led to a problem. When I say communal, I'm talking socialism. And what would happen is eventually people who worked hard, why am I working so hard? I'm not getting any more out of the pile than the next guy. And so everything goes down to the lowest denominator. And eventually what happened is people began to starve. People began to die. Jamestown, out of their first 500 or 600 settlers, they wound up with only 60 surviving. In Plymouth, they caught it a little quicker. William Bradford, he was the second governor of the Plymouth colony, and he's like, okay, we're done with this. This is not working. You get your set of land, you get your property, you work it, you keep what you produce. Any excess, you take to market, and then you could trade. And once it became a more free market type system, the colonies began to prosper. So early on, the idea of requiring a free market in order to survive took hold in the English colonies. So the roots of what we today call capitalism began at the very beginning, because they learned at the very beginning that socialism doesn't work and free markets do. Now, that all said, there was also another part of our culture that emerged very quickly, the gun culture. The right to keep and bear arms, because I tell you what, when you show up someplace where there's nobody except for wildlife and a population that's probably not real happy about your arriving, you're going to want to be armed. You're going to need to survive. You're going to need to kill your dinner. You're going to need to protect what you have.
I'd like to say something about that. Talk about and not that I want to get too off in the weeds of this.
Okay.
But if you watch the I've kind of like stumbled onto the Yellowstone thing.
Oh,
no, hold on. I haven't watched much Yellowstone, but I did get into the 1883 and the 1923, the spinoffs, or like the prequels.
Right.
The 1883 is very interesting because it gives, and the 1923 as well, because it gives you a very interesting concept of what life was like. And I mean, without a firearm, you were nothing. It was like every man had a horse and every man had a gun.
Right.
And it gives you an excellent idea of the mentality of people of that day. And I mean, those were hard men and women. If the way that they depict history from that era is accurate, and I have no reason to believe that it isn't. I think it's very well done to give you an idea of.
Oh, it's a hard
of
life. I mean, imagine you're like a castaway. You know, it's not like Walmart's up the street. Number
well,
one.
I'm not even talking
but
about
the
that.
other thing is this: what I tell people in my classes is what those early settlers and those frontier people who moved west began to learn really fast is the two most important things in their life was their gun and their woman who knew how to shoot one. Because you weren't the only one who needed to know how to fire it. In other words, that gun was such an integral part of just survival. And back then it was about survival. It wasn't just living. It wasn't just paying the bills. It was survival.
To put that into contrast, since Ron brings up 1893, first of all, by the way, some people I know find Yellowstone's production value to be off the charts. I was hope we didn't get too deep in that, but it's very good. Now, there's another.
I've not watched it, but I've heard good things.
Yeah, my parents love it. I'll tell you that. There was another miniseries made last year around the exact same time period, 1890s, called The Gilded Age. And the contrast to what Ron's describing, this is basically New York City with their Puritan class system, and they called it the Gilded Age because the staircases were lined with gilded staircases. The disparity of wealth and the class system is already in place. And you compare that to the frontiers people, and you're saying these people are living under the same form of government. That puts it into perspective.
Mm-hmm. What developed in the Northeast really began with New York City, Philadelphia, and parts of Virginia and the New England states was exactly this Puritan Yankee. I think McClanahan had a video on it, and I saw it, and it was well done. It was pretty on target, and he didn't teach me something I didn't know, but he explained it in a way I had not really thought about it before, if that makes sense.
No, I'm the one who sent you that.
Yeah, you're the one who brought it to my attention. Absolutely. And I was, and all they were was the beginning of the Hamiltonians. And, it's funny. I was talking to a gentleman, Malcolm McGuff, just the other day. He's originally from Australia, and he's a patriot out here in California that, is involved. And he actually was the guy in charge of the Trump campaign in California the first time Trump ran, 2016. And they realized they couldn't take California. So one of the things they did is they focused all of their efforts on phone calls to the battleground states. More phone calls to battleground states came from California than from any other state. And he was brought up when we first met. I was in the audience and he was speaking, and he said something, and he saw me grin ear to ear, and he had to talk to me afterwards because of my reaction to what he said. And he said, and today's politics is basically a battle between Jefferson and Hamilton.
Well, it's not too far from the truth. And if
it isn't very far from the truth. And so, and so that Northeast patriot, not patriot, Puritan Yankee kind of, that's really that's really from the foundation from which Hamiltonianism, or at least a part of that foundation where it came from. Those are the people that appreciated Hamilton, put it that way.
And if you want to know where today's woke culture had its birthplace, that was these Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
It was virtue signaling. It was the establishment deciding what the proper attitudes and beliefs should be. And if you spoke out of line, you would be canceled.
I had a very interesting experience today. This is completely off topic, but it is very relevant to what we're kind of talking about in this moment, and it's relevant to the Constitution in general, because I was at an appointment down in Redlands, and we're all basically similar age people. And the gal in there, she's like, well, I kind of decided that I wasn't going to vote anymore until they got rid of the Electoral College. And I said, What? And she said, well, yeah, because the electoral college was, and she's a fairly smart individual, and definitely, I would not lean left. I would not think that she would lean left by any stretch of the imagination. But she's like, it was designed to keep white men in power, and all this, and I just I kind of like, I allowed my passion to probably come out a little bit more spirited than normal. But I was like, man, that's Marxist freaking garbage. I said that's not what that's not what the what the electoral college was about. So the
Yeah.
electoral college was designed to keep the power centers from electing the president. It was designed, and she's like, "Oh," and I said, I said, number one, I said the only people that we were supposed to vote on was the House of Representatives. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the only people. That's the only,
When you say that, oh, but democracy.
right, and then right about that point, the next client walked in, and I'm pretty good friends with these people, and the guy's like, okay, time to like calm it down. But I was a dog with a bone, and I'm not going to let that die, because and I sent her a message that, after I was like, hey, I'm sorry I let my passion get the best of me. I wasn't trying to be rude or insensitive or condescending, but they really don't have an understanding. People don't have an understanding of what what the founding fathers created when they created
we're convinced they screwed up because it wasn't democratic enough.
Right. So anyway, but the takeaway that I want to give to people is that when you hear things that are wrong, it is very important for you to stand up and speak up, even if you can't even make even if you can't get your point across. It's important for you to not allow things that you know to be false to propagate.
Right.
You just can't. I mean, we are where we are as a country today because not enough good people have stood up and fought for the things that we know to be true.
Darren, democracy socialism or democratic socialism? I guess both.
He probably means democratic socialism, but
yeah, I agree,
but
Darren.
democracy,
I'm tired of hearing that too. All right. Well, and in this election, and you turn on Fox News and this is, democracy 2022. And I'm like, slapping myself in the forehead so hard that my brain's slamming into the back of my skull. But anyway, get back to Target here. So I wanted to tell you kind of all of that to show how we did develop differently. The colonies developed differently. There was a foundation of dispensation of our rights by a supernatural being from the Saxons' point of view, whoever that supernatural being was, and ultimately God-given rights from the Christian point of view. But and that was an important part of the foundation. Important part of the foundation was a free market. Important part of the foundation was this gun culture that emerged, all of it because America went through a development that no other country in the world went through. Either they were conquered or they've been around forever because they're in the old world, but nothing developed the way America did, where it was an enterprise, it was investment, it was families starting anew, it was moving into this new world and trying to make a place for yourself rather than for the military of a country or something like that. So the development was very different here. And this is one of the reasons why I remember way back, I think it was during Obama's presidency, and Ginsburg had said something about, Egypt was going to write a new constitution. And she said, well, don't use the American Constitution as your foundation. And everybody went nuts because she was saying how she hated the American Constitution. That may have been true, but I agreed with her because they have not gone through the same development that we went through. They wouldn't understand how to implement a constitution like ours. They would need to go through that process, whatever that process may be for them, to get to the point where they will develop that type of constitution. So for the tribal kind of mentality out there in the Middle East, a parliamentary system, if they were to move in a direction away from what they have towards something that's more liberty based, a parliamentary system would probably be the next the first best step, and then maybe eventually to something like we have. So I just want people to understand what we have is very special, but part of the reason why it's so special and unique is because we took a different path also. We're exceptional, American exceptionalism, an exception to the rule in many ways, and a lot of it has to do with our development as a society. So in America, in English America, the freemen had adopted what they believed to be the best of the English system, and the colonies developed trying to implement and put into place and adopt the best of the English system and discard what they didn't like. And so the influence of the Magna Carta, the idea of liberty, all of that, and this was this idea that we were different, and that the British weren't understanding their own system or treating it right, and they weren't treating the what we come to call Americans as Englishmen that with the same rights. As the Great Awakening happened between 1734 and the 1770s, the English colonists began to realize what was wrong. Something's wrong here, and they began to dispute it. They began to stand against it. They began to protest and rally. And in fact, John Adams wrote a letter to Thomas Jefferson at one point and he wrote, "The revolution was in the minds of the people, and this was effected from 1760 to 1775, in the course of 15 years before a drop of blood was shed at Lexington." Our development and our understanding and desire for liberty on what it should be, and watching the monarchy and the parliament in Britain screw it up, was all a part of what wound up becoming the American Revolution. The Americans knew their rights, and they were willing to fight for them. If you look at the seal that was adopted by the state of Massachusetts on the eve of the Revolution, it summed up their mood. The image was of a militiaman with a sword in one hand and the Magna Carta in the other. So now we've got this. Now we've won the war. Articles of Confederation is not working. We need a new system. So they write this Constitution, this social contract, this social compact. Compact is really the proper word because it's a lot of members, a lot of parties to the contract. And the founders determined that's the Articles of Confederation, very good, which came before the Constitution. And the founders understood that, like the Magna Carta, the government must be limited by subjecting it to the rule of law. And I had this conversation today. What is the job of your representative in Congress? And usually the answer is, well, to listen to his constituents, to do what his constituents want. No. His primary job is to follow the rule of law. If his constituents believe that everybody with green eyes should be arrested and thrown in jail, should he listen to his constituents? No, because he knows that's wrong. The rule of law tells him that's wrong. The rule of law comes first. And the rule of law, in our case, is not just natural law, but it's the Constitution of the United States. Excuse me. So they wanted to subject our system to the rule of law and a set of rules that limited the central government. One thing that they had seen throughout history is whenever you gave any central government umbrella power, it became tyrannical. Mm-hmm. So what we needed was a system that championed localism, yet had a central government big enough to handle the things it needed to handle, but not a national government that has an umbrella of total power, only limited authorities over certain things. So this limited federal government only has certain duties. It's been established only to do certain things. Everything else is left to the states. All right, so now I'm going to put up my graphic because we're going to kind of go through the preamble here.
Well, here, I'm already one step ahead of you, man.
Oh? Nope, that's not the one.
That's the preamble, is it not?
Well, yeah, but it's not the graphic I'm going to use.
Okay.
let's see here. Let me share screen and see window. There it is. All right. Can you guys all see that, or does it need to be bigger?
It's okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right. So what that is, that graphic, what it is really there's 4 parts of the preamble. So we the people of the United States, and I already talked about we the people. It doesn't say we the citizens.
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yes, I can. How's that?
That's much better. Much better.
Okay. So, we the people of the United States. Remember earlier, it's we the people, not we the citizens, not we the free men, not we the white dudes with waxed hair and wool clothing. We the people of the United States. That's everybody. We the people of the United States in order to. Now, excuse me. So the term in order to is an important part of this, because what they're saying there in the preamble is we wrote this in order to achieve something. There's a reason in order to. Now, there's 4 reasons we wind up with. First, we have form a more perfect union. Now, earlier, our good friend Ron there had shown you the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation was written during the war, 1777, a year after the Declaration of Independence. It then was put out to the states, and it required unanimous approval. The 13th state finally approved it in 1781. So in 1781, the Articles of Confederation became the basically Constitution before the Constitution. So we had no government per se between 1776 and 1781. We were fighting a war using a 13 states that took care of everything for themselves. They had all the authorities, and a Continental Congress, which was a single legislative house that couldn't do anything for the most part without the states approving it. And they realized we needed a more perfect union. It wasn't working. What happened was during the war, especially, matter of fact, I talk about this when I talk about the Battle of Trenton. When the Battle of Trenton happened, this was Christmas night of 1776 when the Battle of Trenton had been planned out. And, and that began, with the crossing of the Delaware River. You got the painting with George Washington standing up tall, leading the charge, which means it wasn't accurate at all because, first of all, it was windy, sleet was flying, it was snowy, it was nasty, there was ice all over he wasn't standing, I guarantee it. First of all. Second of all, your high-ranking guys are the last ones to come, not the lead boat. The lead boat would be the guys breaking up the ice and doing the hard work. But nonetheless, that situation, and they really needed a win. George Washington knew he needed a win because he wanted to hang on to his troops. Most of their enlistments were expiring with the new year. And, and if they didn't get a win, how were they going to recruit people? And people weren't going to re-up. And so one of the things they did also after they won Trenton to convince people to re-enlist or to enlist in the first place, they offered them money. Say, hey, when the war's over, we will give you money for serving. And so that also, aside from the cause, help, and they also offered land grants and things like that if you're willing to enlist for more than 3 years or 3 years or more. So when the war was over, that money was issued by the Continental Congress under the Articles of Confederation, and it was fiat money. It was paper money that really had no value behind it. It was worthless. And the veterans are like, hey, wait a second, man. Nobody's taking this money. I can't pay my bills. My creditors aren't taking it. It's worthless. And the government's like, well, that's what we got. Give me some gold. Give me some silver. Give me something. Not this garbage. So the veterans began to rebel, to rally, to protest. In fact, as the creditors began to take them to court, they would block the steps of the courthouses to keep the opposition, the creditors' lawyers, from getting to the judges. And after a while, we began to see the firings of weapons, bloodshed. And at one point, they even tried to take over the Springfield Armory. The Union under the Articles of Confederation wasn't working, because what happened was then the states are like, well, what do we do about this? Insurrection, rebellion, whatever you want to call it.
Shays Rebellion, was it not?
Shays Rebellion. And the Continental Congress is saying, well, use your militia. And the states are like, it's our militia that's rebelling. We got nothing here. Government under the Articles of Confederation, they can't hire an army. They can't tax. They don't have those kinds of authorities. They have all that the Continental Congress can do under the Articles of Confederation. The only thing they could do without the states starting it was wage war and declare war. That was it. So there's a problem. Well, what wound up happening is the merchants in Boston put together some mercenary forces, likely European mercenaries. And they came in and they started shooting at the vets. So they were taking down that rebellion. That would be like the corporations hiring a bunch of people to shoot at our veterans today. Would that tick you off? So the Union wasn't right. Now, so we needed a more perfect Union. They thought it was good under the Articles of Confederation, but it wasn't perfect enough. We need a more perfect Union. Form a more perfect Union. A more complete Union would be another way of saying it. As for established justice, the word established means to create.
That's why they say here in the preamble, in order to form a more perfect union.
Right. In order to form a more perfect union, establish justice. Establish is to create justice. Justice existed at the state level, but there was no federal justice system. So to establish justice at the federal level, to ensure domestic tranquility, the states were like siblings. They fought over everything. They fought over turf. They fought over taxes. They fought over commerce. They fought over, trade with each other, so on and so forth. I like to use in my classes as an example, my brother and sister and I. My sister and I used to fight so badly that she would rip so much hair out of my head that one day my mom was like going through my hair and brushing my hair or something. And she's like, hey, Jerry, call my dad over. He's got bald spots. It was because my sister was ripping so much hair out of my head. We fought like the states did. They're siblings. But when my sister had bullies picking on her, she's 40.5 years younger than me. Guess what she did? She called bigger brother. I worked with her to stop those problems. I stood beside her for that because I still love her. I'm her sibling. Same thing here. Ensure domestic tranquility. They're fighting like cats and dogs. So the federal government's job is to be a mediator between the states, to resolve disputes between the states. And then finally, 4, provide for the common defense. Having a militia is great, but what if you need a common defense, a military in which all of the states contribute to handle things that are bigger than just an invasion against a state? So a common defense, a Army, Navy, Marine Corps, and whatnot. What would result from the federal government doing its job is the next part. Promote the general welfare. Notice that welfare is capitalized, general is lowercase. Welfare is the key word there. What they mean by welfare is to put in, I'm sorry, not to put in good order. What they mean by welfare is a condition of all's well.
Unfortunately, that has been misinterpreted quite often for the last 200. It's one of the worst terms nowadays that we have.
Well, when we get to Article 1, Section 8, where the actual clause is, we'll get deeper into that. But you're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
I will hold my complaint till then.
Thank you. So promote the general welfare, welfare meaning the condition of all is well. This is a result that happens. As Warhamster was alluding to, it's not an excuse to pass laws. Oh, we're doing it for the general welfare. No, that's the result. That is the condition that happens if the federal government's doing its job. So secure, so promote the general welfare, and then the second result: secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Secure, to keep in place where it belongs. The blessings of liberty. What are the blessings of liberty? Blessings, capital B, blessings comes from God. Liberty, that's the first of your rights. Well, the second of your rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right. So blessings of liberty are your natural rights, to secure your natural rights. Now, in the Declaration of Independence, interestingly, it uses that same word, secure. So if you read in the Declaration of Independence in the second paragraph, it says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The Constitution and the government is not there to protect your rights or to guarantee your rights. I hate it when they say, well, guaranteed constitutional rights. It doesn't guarantee anything. It's not its job. Its job is to secure your rights. To protect your rights would be to protect them from the enemy. But who's the enemy? The federal government in most cases when it comes to your rights. You don't want them protecting us from themselves. It's part of the problem. They're their own auditors. They're their own whatever. So their job isn't to protect your rights, and their job isn't to guarantee your rights. I mean, they say, well, we're going to guarantee you education. We're going to guarantee you housing. We're going to guarantee you health care. We're going to guarantee you that we pay off your student loan even. Okay, well, where's my guaranteed gun?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, suddenly it doesn't apply to that right. Wonder why. Maybe because guarantee isn't a proper definition. They're not there to protect your rights. They're not there to guarantee your rights. They're there to secure your rights. You put a child in a car seat to secure them. If you get in an accident, the kid's not going through the windshield because they're secured in place where they belong. Where does your rights, your blessings of liberty belong? In your possession. Their job is to secure your rights. My rights, in other words, is none of their business unless there's a problem with my rights being secured, such as a clash of rights. And an example I like to use is I have a right to swing my arms, and well, Ron, you have a right not to be punched in the face.
Right. So let me ask you.
Swing my arms all I want, but as long as I'm not punching you in the face and I'm being responsible for my rights, none of government's business. I punch you in the face because I was swinging my arms in an irresponsible manner. Suddenly, government's got to get involved because there was a clash of our rights. Somebody's guilty.
Let me ask you a question, Doug. And
sure.
Okay, so we obviously we're only talking about the preamble. We're not talking about the actual Constitution yet. I mean, obviously the preamble is a part of the Constitution, but the preamble, as I understand it, was laid out after the Constitution was written as a kind of like an introduction to okay, so this is like a short little explanation.
Yeah, it's not legally binding. It's just an introduction.
Right. So where would obviously the Declaration of Independence has its place in terms of one of our founding documents because it essentially and it didn't necessarily enumerate rights, but it enumerated our general philosophy. Yes,
you could say that it's not legally binding.
Yeah, you got to be careful on that one because.
But okay, well, and so that was the question that I have.
Well, let me say this real quick.
Let me ask the question.
Okay.
Where do you put the Declaration of Independence in terms of importance and why in our founding documents?
It ties into what I was going to say, which is this. It was the idea, but the Constitution codified that idea.
Okay.
Into law.
It was the key. Yeah, it was not a legal document until.
Well, it was. Would you say that it was a legal document from the standpoint that it was a legal document to Britain?
It was a legal document to Britain telling them we're out of here.
Yeah,
right.
But it didn't establish laws or anything like that.
Right, but it was a legal document from the standpoint that it was telling Britain off. We're done.
This is our official legal document saying we're not a part of you anymore.
Right.
And the ideas in it, like I said, for the American people were presented by it, but they weren't codified into law. They didn't become the law of the land until they were encapsulated inside a constitution.
So technically, it's inaccurate to say that that in 1976 we celebrated the 200-year anniversary of the creation of the country because the nation was not actually invented until.
Well, it was a country in the sense that we had declared independence. We were a country, but we were a country without a government.
13 sovereign. I would say we were 13 sovereign states.
Well, if you read the Declaration, they did declare that they were a united, country of states. They saw themselves as that entity, but they were a country, a union of states, but they had no government yet. And then the Articles of Confederation, while proposed in 1777, wasn't even officially the government until 1781.
Right here. So we, therefore, the representatives of the United States. And I find it interesting that the U is not capitalized.
Yeah, that's a very key component, actually, because at the time, they really saw themselves as states first. The Union was second. And this is where, certain groups that I get into debates with about certain conspiracy theories, they're right, sort of, but it's not that way necessarily anymore, is that you were a citizen of your state first. And then your state formed the Union. And that was the attitude.
I think I really despise using Hollywood or Hollywood productions to because a lot of times people look at things that happen in Hollywood and they actually put more emphasis on them on the Hollywood production in terms of what like a book would say. But I do think that there were a few nuances in the show John Adams that they got it right, and one of them was there was a time when it was right about the time when Virginia was going to propose the separation, basically, which formed the Declaration of Independence. And he says, we're about to take a leak in the dark, and he said or something about, actually no, I think that was wrong, but he said I would much rather be in my country. They said he's talking about he wanted much rather be in Massachusetts or much rather be back in Virginia. And they talked about their country. They didn't talk about the country being the United States. And I think I think in that little nuance, the Hollywood got it accurate in that sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they were, and also another place that Hollywood began to get it right, then they screwed it up, was the second National Treasure movie, where the Ben Gates character says, before the war between the states, it was the United States are, then it became the United States is. And that's correct. But then he screws it up and says, so it really wasn't until the war that we really became united. Well, and that's where they mess it up. But, and that I'm glad you pointed out that small U. And I normally do point it out when I talk about the Declaration, because that is very important. It's even more important if you look at the document itself. It's not just that it's lowercase. United is small, and States of America are huge, capitalized and much bigger letters. United is like this minuscule word. It's not that important because the union's important, but at that time, the sovereignty and the autonomy of the states was the most important part.
The reason Ron's question, I liked it, whether the Declaration was a legal document, is a lot of discussion on the internet on the upcoming Brunson case on Friday, but he actually listed the Declaration as a legal document supporting his claims, and that was one of the major mistakes that I pointed out right away, because it is not technically a legal document. It has no standing in any U.S. court of law.
I want to try to find where it says here it is right here.
Well, go to the very top of the document, though. Go to the very top.
But all right.
See what it says? The Unanimous Federation of the
States of America.
United is?
Oh, I see what you're saying up here. Yeah. Of the 13 United States of America.
Yeah. So United.
So it's not just not capitalized. I mean, in that case, it's a little word.
Yeah, 13 and United are both adjectives describing. I believe that's
right. Exactly.
Syntax.
But they are States of America, and like I said in the beginning, they really saw themselves as a Virginian, a Pennsylvanian, a Rhode Islander, a New Yorker, more than an American. In fact, the term American, while it was kind of around, it really didn't take off until about the 1820s.
And when and not that I want to harp on the War of Northern Aggression, but when you looked at the units the units for that fought in there, they were units of the states. Even today, I mean, what was the movie of the black soldiers from the 54th Massachusetts?
Right,
You know,
exactly. Well, here's something else to think about. The states came into a union to become the United States, the country. How were the states formed? The counties came together in a union to become a state.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that also. The counties made their determination on what was going to belong to what. Yeah, it's like Massachusetts originally.
That would actually be an interesting show to do. I think that would actually apply, or that would be very applicable as a foundation for what we're doing here. And I think we should consider doing that, taking doing a 1A or whatever, and doing a little bit of that history to lay the foundation.
In a nutshell, here's what that says. Our country formed from the bottom up, not the top down.
Correct.
Now,
the counties became the states, and the states became the country. It didn't become a federal government that decided the states were okay.
There are some exceptions later in history where the United States had, we'd had territories, and they just basically declared it a state.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking the original early on. In fact, Alaska doesn't even have counties.
I didn't know that, actually.
No, Alaska doesn't have counties?
They don't have counties, and they don't have county sheriffs because they don't have counties. In the case of Hawaii, their counties are the islands. But, Alaska doesn't have counties. So that's why they don't have a county sheriff.
Now, I find it interesting that only one state has only has a single body legislature, and that's Nebraska.
Yeah, they decided to do that during the 1930s. I think it was a bad mistake to have a unicameral legislature, but that's their decision.
But does that not violate the Constitution from the standpoint that it's a Republican form of government?
It does, but that had already been violated in 1913.
Well, and they were one of the early states to adjust the fact that they didn't allow their state senate to be appointed by the counties, that it was and one per county. It was democratically voted, and they just decided to bring them together. Because what was the difference between the two at that point?
I agree. It's 4:00, and I know it's time to end here, but I want to finish up because I was at a meeting in Tulsa a couple weeks ago where I literally got up and I asked the question to General Flynn. I asked, "Are we going to are we going to have to? Is this ultimately going to go kinetic? Are we going to actually have to stand up for our rights and take up arms and to fix this situation?" And nobody really could answer that question. Obviously, that was a question that could not have been answered.
No, and he wouldn't dare.
Nobody would answer that question with cameras in the rooms, because that would be everywhere. Okay, so I get that, but one of the things that they said in there was that the military is not coming to save us, that the military can't act because we have a constitution and whatnot. And I was, I didn't want to be disrespectful in any way, but one of the things that I wanted to say was that we have been acting outside of the scope of the Constitution for well over 100 years. And to say that we are operating, that we have a constitution as justification for, the military not coming in and doing anything, to me, I thought was a rather poor excuse. And I've heard that on a multitude of content creators when they're interviewing people that are high level.
Well, the Constitution applies when it suits their purposes, and the Constitution says something different than it actually says when it suits their purposes.
Right. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that that was said, which actually leads me to believe that I think some of those options are still on the table if it ever does get down to that level. Because what the heck do we have a military for if it's not going to preserve our country?
to protect against foreign
There's a
invasion.
long discussion about that I would love to get into, but here's the thing. It's raining, so I'm not going to go over the Ortega. I'm going around,
Right.
which adds
100%.
like 15 minutes to my trip.
Yeah. But anyway, listen, everybody, thank you for
I'll wrap up the preamble next week for sure.
Yeah, well, and we're trying some different stuff here to do some more visual things to
and these
make the
discussions
class
are
a little
good
bit
too.
better.
I want questions. I want us to talk about what we're talking about. I want us to get into the context, because we need to understand that context, and this discussion about the attitude of the time, because part of the reason why sometimes people have trouble understanding the Constitution is because we're thinking about it with a 2023 mind.
Yeah, and I would like to say that this time through the Constitution is probably going to take us a little bit longer, I believe, because we're going to go a little bit slower, and we're going to do. We will kind of get off into some of the weeds and do some things like what we were talking about, because this is my fourth or fifth time through the Constitution.
Well, probably more than that, considering the Corona class.
And same thing, right? And same thing with Warhamster. We've been through this multiple times, and so I think that the things that we bring to that to the table to add to this, we're not necessarily students as much as we are kind of like not even substitute teachers, but like teachers' aides in the class and co-presenters. Yeah, so
I will have to give my apology to Warhamster. The one time he wanted to get into the conversation, I kind of told him, "Now you got to wait till Article 1, Section 8." But but I do appreciate the fact that you gave way the way you did, Warhamster. But do appreciate all of your input. Like I said, I've got normally, for those of you who don't know much about where we live, I live in Southern California. My Orange County class, San Juan Capistrano, is on the other side of a hill, mountain. It would be considered a mountain in some states, and it's a windy road to get up over it that I usually take. It's raining, and here in California, the moment a raindrop hits the ground, everybody starts crashing into each other, and going on a windy one lane each way road on a rainy day is probably not in my best interest. So I'm going to go around, which adds 15, 20 minutes, which means I got to go like 5 minutes ago. So that's why I'm not really going to stick around, talk a whole lot. But that said, next week we will wrap up the preamble, and then we will get into something that's very important. One of my favorite parts of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, because it really is the perfect start of the Constitution. Gentlemen, I appreciate.
Yes.
And
Doug, go because we
I appreciate, gentlemen. I'm going to get.
Go.
I just want to make sure I told everybody. Yeah, Tracy. SoCal drivers like cats in the rain. You got it.
You have no idea how accurate that is. All right, everybody. Thanks for showing up today.
Ron, before we go, I had something I wanted to drop in there. We got that Friday. We've got the big Brunson case supposed to be in some kind of a hearing with the Supreme Court. People are getting very excited about it. I would say dampen your enthusiasm. Doug and I did a video on the Citizen 71776 YouTube channel last Friday night. Starts about 25 minutes in. Kind of went through a really good Tracy Beans article that talks about why the case is probably not the one to rest your hopes on. But hopefully you get a chance to watch that, and who knows?
Actually, I actually heard General Flynn and Mike Lindell's topic, their thoughts on that as well, and they said the same thing. They said that the words that he used was moonshot. So,
well, it's not even. I actually think of it less chances than that.
No.
So, but the Moore v. Harper case has been argued orally, and that one has a chance to change elections going forward. So all hope is not lost.
Well, I still want to see some. I still want to see some different stuff in Arizona, but that's obviously a topic for another day. So, anyway, thank you everybody for coming, and I hope you enjoyed what we're going to try to. We welcome some feedback if you guys want to see some different stuff, but we're going to try to make this a little bit more interactive and a little bit more visual to enhance the experience and to actually get a little bit more deeper into some of the nuances of the Constitution. So thanks everybody for showing up, and we will see you next week at 3 p.m. Actually, probably about 2:45, 2:50, something like that. So we're always here a little bit early. Usually Warhamster and I are to kind of just chit chat with you guys a little bit. So we'll see you next week.
Cheers.